All right, so I want to thank everybody for joining us on this Facebook Live stream of a conversation with County Mayoral candidate Trent Staggs, talking about issues of housing and homelessness. This is the third of a series of 4 conversations that Crossroads Urban Center is organizing about housing and homelessness. The first one was 2 weeks ago, and we had a member of the Salt Lake City Council, Salt Lake County Council, and state legislature talking about things that local and state government could do to address affordable housing despite budget issues. Last week, we had a conversation with people who work directly with homeless people and others in crisis, where we talked about different places where strategic investments in housing could reduce housing and homelessness. And this week, we're talking about some of the same issues with somebody who's running to be the mayor of Salt Lake County, which plays a huge role in addressing homelessness and how our community deals with housing affordability. And so we wanted to thank Mayor Trent Staggs from Riverton for joining us. And I guess we should give you a minute to introduce yourself, since you're actually throwing your hat in the ring and are running for county mayor. But before we do that, I wanted to thank 3 pastors who've agreed to come and help ask questions, because I watched the last 2 videos and there was way too much of me talking. And so I thought it would be better to get Crossroads Urban Center has been in existence since 1966. We've always had churches and other faith communities that have collected food for our food pantry and clothes for our thrift store. Starting way back in 1995, we decided that we wanted to create a vehicle to give people from those faith communities a way to participate in policy discussions around issues like housing and affordability and homelessness. And so we created a project we call the Coalition of Religious Communities. And so these pastors are all from churches that have been involved with that. We have 2 Pastor Christines, the Reverend Christine Higueria-Street from St. Matthew's Lutheran Church, Pastor Christine Myers-Tegeder from First Presbyterian in Salt Lake City, and Andrew Fleishman from the Wasatch Presbyterian Church. So we will start off with giving Mayor Staggs a couple minutes to introduce himself, and then we'll go into the questions that we sent to him in advance so he could have a little time to think about the issues.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. I really appreciate it. I'm really impressed with your organization. I didn't realize it had been founded or started back in 1966, but just the amount of work and effort that you put into really combating and fighting poverty and homelessness, so much that you do to provide food and necessary resources for those that are truly struggling. So I think it's a highly commendable. And for the pastors that are here, thank you very much for taking your time as well. A little bit about me. I grew up in the southwest part of Salt Lake County. Moved in here when I was 15 years old, attended Bingham High School, went to the University of Utah, and graduated in political science and economics, and then went on to get a master's in business administration from BYU. So for the last several years, 20 plus years of my career, business-wise, I've been involved principally in 3 different industries. I've worked in finance with Morgan Stanley. I ran my own nationwide mortgage brokerage company. And for the last 6 years, I've been working with various companies as a consultant, but working principally with a group that is publicly traded and actually produces clean technology. And so that business background, I think, has been instrumental in my policy making and decision making. As I got into elected office back in 2013, I served a term on the city council for Riverton, and then was elected as mayor in 2017. So my 3rd year here, and I love our community. I made a conscious effort to be involved in local politics because I think that's where the largest impact can and should be made. And so I'm really grateful to have this chance to be running for county mayor and to have this conversation with you here today.
Well, thank you. I'm going to turn the time over to the pastors to ask the questions we sent you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being with us, Mayor Staggs. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to talk with us. I'm a pastor in Taylorsville, and we have seen, even in Taylorsville, we've seen the effects that homelessness has had on our community, and especially in these days. In 2019, there were 491 people, families with children who were in a shelter for 3 months or longer in Salt Lake County. And out of those, 119 of those parents and children slept at the shelter for 6 months or longer. So my question is, too many children are staying either in homeless shelters for more than 6 months, or if they've returned to the shelter 3 or 4 times during the past 2 years. Salt Lake County has some supportive housing that's available for homeless families with children, but none of that housing was designed solely for the specific needs of children that have experienced homelessness. Should the county spearhead efforts to produce supportive housing projects that focus on the needs of homeless children and their families during the next 4 years?
Well, I think the short answer is yes. There's a very important role that the county can and should play here. I am a big believer that, in our Constitution, it indicates that we are really to provide for the common defense, but promote the general welfare. And there's a number of ways the county can exert its leadership role in the promotion of our general welfare. I think what has been so great and powerful and the genius of our nation has been that we have so many great churches, nonprofits, and associations, these communities that have really stepped up and helped provide so many critical services. The government does have a role, however, in being able to help direct this, and the county does. I think the county directs some $7 million annually in grants and millions more, I'm told, in other funds and employee time in the administration of these grants and trying to ensure that we can make a difference. And so to me, that's very important. I was able to tour just the other week with Mayor Hale from Midvale, the Life Start Village facility there in Midvale. And I just found that fascinating. In doing the tour, here's an organization that I'm told doesn't accept any state dollars, and yet they are able to intake families or single parents with children, and they walk them through a phased program where they really personalize a plan for their needs. And it's a long-term commitment. If they are able to take on a portion of the accountability and the payment, they can transition from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3. And I think that's a success. That's a best practice that we should probably be looking at. Organizations like Life Start, and we could model more housing, supportive housing, particularly for children, that can be so impacted. I mean, that I can't speak personally from experience, but I can just imagine the impact that would have on children, and being able to have a supportive framework there and knowing that you're secure in your housing is got to be critical and fundamental to the development of these children. And so, yes, I think that there is a role there that the county can play, and there is over the course of these next 4 years, and would be a priority in my administration. And I think we do have some best practices that we can lean to and look at as we try to build more housing for individuals and for families, for children that are in this situation.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Mayor Staggs, Andrew Fleishman here. Thanks again. I echo what everyone said. It's great to have you here. You know, on a very personal level, just completely separate from this, medical care it's tough. It's been something I've struggled with since I was 18 years old on how to figure out how to do it as a chronically ill person. And that's just a personal example. We all know the challenges of that. And this year, Utah fully expanded Medicaid and made it possible to integrate homeless services with the physical and mental health services. And again, so critical, our most vulnerable population, we need to provide holistic care in order to address any of the needs and all the needs. And as a person of faith, that's a priority. But the COVID-19 crisis has highlighted how important that integration can be. What can the county do to ensure all people receiving homeless services are in fact connected to whatever medical care they may need to stabilize their lives? Because that requires expertise and leadership.
Yeah, it really does. I love this question, really. I think, not to be critical, there are so many people and great organizations that are attempting to help with this problem of homelessness, of housing affordability. I think I saw on one of the gubernatorial debates, I think it was Spencer Cox, that indicated that they've described the program much like a ship with 12 steering wheels or rudders. And to me, I really think that we need to be able to, in order to solve this issue, we need to have a coordinated intake process. And we need to ensure that as people are admitted, that they understand that with the Medicaid expansion, that can be the source that can help cover some of the costs or the needs of their particular situation. But really, we need to be able to have a coordinated plan, a metrics plan. We need to know exactly how many people are experiencing homelessness, and coming up with an individualized or crafted plan for their specific needs. I think that's, without that, we won't be able to really solve this issue. We've had about $100 million spent on it through Operation Rio Grande and others. And without that coordination and that really metrics-based plan, we know how many people, these aren't just numbers, these are individuals, but we need to know how many individuals are suffering or have this confronted with these challenges, and then come up with a plan with the wraparound services, with often the mental and other health aids that they need in order to either attain that self-sufficiency or be able to be in a program more longer term that is really going to meet their needs. And so I actually have a plan, and this is a big component of it that you can see at trentstaggs.com on homelessness.
Andrew, did you have any follow-up to that? Okay. I didn't want to jump on you. You're muted, Andrew.
Sorry. I heard that you said you actually had a plan. Could you repeat that? Just that last part that you said? I just missed it.
Yeah, if when I've run for office as a city councilman or as a city mayor, I never wanted to just run on a bunch of generalities and platitudes. I want people to be able to know exactly what I would do. And undertaking this race here, this campaign has been no different for me. And so if you go to trentstaggs.com/issues, you can see a whole host of issues. Air quality, homelessness, affordable housing, taxes and spending. And I have a one-page plan and a short video on every single one of those issues. And homelessness, there's a three-point plan or three-point plan on homelessness. And it starts with that coordination, providing skills and wraparound services, and then also supplying the medication and the mental health resources that people need. And I get into the specifics. But to your point, to your question specifically, I love this question. And I think it's a big, big part of of how we solve really and tackle the root cause of homelessness.
Well, thank you so much, and many blessings to you in the work ahead.
Thank you.
Well, Mayor Staggs, I also thank you for being here today with us. I'm a pastor at First Presbyterian Church. That's the one right on South Temple. So I'm right in the throes of downtown. I chose urban ministry for purposely. It's what I want to do. I did not know I was going to end up pastoring the church that Pamela Atkinson goes to. So
No pressure.
I have big shoes to fill. But the questions that I have all relate to affordable housing. And we already have an affordable housing crisis. We don't have enough. And I think with COVID, that is only going to get worse. I think more and more people will not be able to afford where they're living. As you know, Salt Lake's cost of housing has gone up, I think, at 3 times the rate of inflation. I learned from the Planning Commission just the other day that in Salt Lake County, only 17% of the land is even zoned for housing. Because we're stuck between preserved mountains and salt flats, and a giant airport takes up 1/3 of it. So what do you want to do about affordable housing? The first question, of course, relates to what land, might you want to use to try to put affordable housing on? So let's start with that one.
Yeah, I think that there's a great opportunity. And I watched the segment from a few weeks ago. I think it was the first one. It was really remarkable to hear how much Salt Lake City in particular has done. And with $1 billion budget versus a state $20 billion budget, Salt Lake City's commitment to affordable housing, I think the council member that was on there saying they've done more than the state has, not per capita, but in the aggregate, in the total dollar amount. And I found that statistic fascinating. I think Bill indicated that, yeah, we need the county to really follow suit and exert some leadership here so that we can really move the needle on this issue, because you're right, we do have a housing affordability issue. We've got a housing gap, of some 40,000 of it, depending on the studies you read, in the 40 to 50,000 range in terms of household formation outstripping housing supply. And so that, of course, is putting pressure on housing prices. You see the increases that you just mentioned there in Salt Lake City. I mean, a 3-fold increase. But there is some opportunity here that I think the county can assist with. There was an op-ed that I read about 2 years ago in 2018 that was written by Scott Anderson of Zions Bank. And the title of the op-ed, it stuck out to me. It said, unlocking the value of public assets. And they talked about inventorying the assets of the county, many of which are underutilized. And then how can we best use those? And so I know it's been explored or talked about. There's some survey that the county, I reached out and asked where we're at with that. I think it's to be concluded by the end of the year. That might have some properties that could be either donated, or what I would like to see happen really is to put these properties into a special purpose vehicle with a developer. That way the county maintains the asset on its balance sheet, and arguably that asset, I think, will grow, because as you build housing units on that property that is owned by the county, or now put into a special purpose vehicle that their percentage ownership, the county's percentage, will only grow. It does several things. I mean, without having to pay for the cost of land, then the development just has the time and materials basically to pay for. And these units therefore should not be as expensive and could be offered at rates that are within the, say, 80% AMI that the adjustable modified income and could be affordable. And so I think there's some great opportunities for the county to take a leadership role in that regard. There are a number of properties that are along high traffic areas, high transportation corridors or transit corridors where you got access to transit, where it makes sense to be able to put these types of units there, and in some type of innovative solution like that, I think it actually would move the needle.
So what would your, how would you want to approach that? Would you want to have a task force assigned to that? Would you work with planning commissions? How would you want to go about that? Because we're already short, and we're going to be more short. So we kind of have to hit the ground running.
We really do.
We can.
Yeah, no, we really do. I think there's been enough talk. Candidly, I think it's time for action. And so when that survey is concluded by the end of the year, then I think that's a determination that the county council will need to make. But I think you could put it out for RFP immediately and get the interest of the development community to see what they can do.
Is there anything else specific that you were thinking of that would help, that the county can do to address the housing affordability issue, especially for low income, working poor families, and honestly now even middle class working families are getting squeezed out too?
Yeah, I think there are a couple other things that I could think of. Number one is zoning. I mean, that's really going to attack the root cause of a problem where you said we only have 17% of land that's even buildable. And so the zoning, where we are along major transportation corridors or transit, I think it makes sense. And the encouragement to reform in certain zoning. I think there have been ideas floated in terms of home sharing. I think that's been successful in New York and other areas where people that are struggling can actually share a portion of somebody's home. And we've been trying to tackle that in Riverton specifically by finally enacting an accessory dwelling unit. And I know many cities are doing that now too. That's pretty low-hanging fruit as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't require any build out at all, any infrastructure. It's literally just allowing people that have single family homes to also create accessory dwelling units, whether they're standalone or whether they're renting out their basement, for example, and just looking at those ordinances city by city. I think the county can the county mayor can definitely exert some leadership there and working with cities to ensure that they've enacted such changes to their ordinance. The other thing I know is that with tax credits, the county oversees millions of dollars in federal tax credits and monies that can be used to spur affordable housing. And we've seen that in Salt Lake City. The council member that was on previously, I think, said they had put in about 20 million, and that was matched with over 230 million in private dollars to be able to create units. And I know hundreds of units are coming online just in the last year, and more are planned here coming up that are in the pipeline that I'm aware of. So another idea was zoning, for example, and I heard this talked about. I mean, the way in which we shop has changed significantly. I know the retail world has been turned upside down. And so the large malls that we have, say maybe not in downtown Salt Lake, but are out in my part of the valley, in the south part of the valley, where we have these really expansive spaces in these malls with enormous parking lots. It may make sense to take a look at those parcels of land for development of residential housing, and would help, I think, make a dent in the shortage that we have right now.
Thank you.
So one of the questions we asked you was about possibly setting up a county commission on this. And I think, actually, I was really glad to hear you say that, you didn't want to study this more. I think one other way a commission could work would be that it would convene people in the development community, people in the service provider community, people who have different interests in improving the system, to coordinate, like to identify gaps and talk about like who has the capacity to deal with one of the gaps, so that you have a more coordinated approach to housing affordability. I think what that does is it activates the county's ability to convene. And so I think the question that we asked about, that we sent you about, would you be willing to set up a commission? It wasn't just a commission to study the issue, but a commission to coordinate efforts to address the issue. I don't know. And so I guess I'm still curious whether that would be something you'd be interested in thinking about. A model for that would be when she became mayor of Salt Lake City, one of the things that Jackie Biskupski did during her first year was create a blue ribbon task force on housing. That task force, their meetings were not open to the public, and I wasn't, but you would hear about the work they were doing, like about opportunities they identified. A lot of the work that Chris Wharton talked about in the conversation you mentioned initially began in the discussions of that task force. So having a group of people in developers, finance sector, people, service providers, talk about where the gaps are and who can address the gaps. I think, okay, I'm starting to repeat myself and oversell the exact same idea, so I'll stop. I'm just curious if you think there could be value in doing something like that.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, I think so. I think, look, I'm a big fan of stealing best practices, use your eyes and plagiarize, as I had a professor say some time ago. And so if they're great blue ribbon task forces, other things that have happened in Salt Lake City, things that we can model, like we talked about with Life Start Village and other good examples and things that you're doing. Absolutely. And I think one thing we've been successful at in my city is the creation of resident volunteer committees. I met with South Salt Lake recently and saw all that they're doing with their Promises program, which is amazing. And the people they've been able to bring together to fulfill that, all the programming and everything else that's needed to help these children in their most formative years, I think was just my hats off to them. And so, yes, not just to study the issue, but to take all that has been done and have a commission that I think also needs to have elected official representation. And so the county council members, I think, drafting at least 2 of them to participate. And that helps, I think, it also signals to the development community that, hey, they're serious. If you have a county mayor that's leading out on it saying, I want to create this community, I want to get something done in this next year, we want to put it out for RFP. And then we have other elected officials there that comprise and make up that committee. Then I think they can get that request for proposal put together, and anything else they need supplementary to that, so that we can get those requests in, identify properties that can be built, and move forward immediately. I think it would be a very big goal of mine. And one thing the state did create in 2019, they created a task force, and the county has, the county mayor has a seat there. I think there's incredible opportunity here for the county mayor to exert a lot of political capital and leverage. We cover Salt Lake County as 1/3 of the state population, and we account for 50% of the GDP of the state. I mean, we are the economic engine of the state. And the county mayor will have seats at the inland port, the point of the mountain. There's a lot going on in the state and in this county in particular, and the county mayor is going to have a very critical role. And homelessness, housing affordability, all of these things cannot be overlooked when we have so much success that I know we're going to see in the decades to come with respect to our economic growth and development. And as we grow, this has to be one of our top priorities, and would be with my administration.
Well, thank you that's actually for taking the time, for having such thoughtful answers. I think I've never heard anybody complain about a webinar not lasting as long as you'd planned it to last. And so I think we're probably about done. I mean, we have a lot of busy people on this. And so I want to thank everybody for participating, particularly Mayor Staggs. I should say we are still working on setting up an appointment with, or a similar conversation with your opponent, Mayor Wilson. And it's with COVID, she's being pushed in a lot of different directions. And so we've had some trouble scheduling something. Hopefully that will work out. This is conversation 3 of 4 that we have scheduled. The next one is going to be talking about in more detail about the first question, because we talked about the need for a unit or a project specifically geared toward the needs of homeless kids and their parents. And we'll be talking about that in more detail, both about why it's needed, you know, about the different types of trauma that homelessness both causes for children and exposes children to, but then also about, you know, how, what kinds of services would be needed to help families transition out of extended homelessness into a more secure, healing environment, so that we, because kids are resilient, but they actually need to have space to recover. If they're, you know, like, nobody is resilient if they keep on being re-traumatized, right? And so we're going to be, that's what we'll be talking about next week, the same time, same place. Again, I want to thank both Mayor Staggs and everyone who's asked questions, and invite you all to listen next week. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.